Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone. And if you're a fan of our show, you'll know that one of our most popular features is our Gone But Not Forgotten series, in which we pay tribute to legendary stars who are no longer with us. Today, we're honoring one of the most beloved and iconic female recording artists and performers in the history of country music, Lynn Anderson. She recorded 52 albums and 72 singles, 50 of which were top 40 hits. 18 reached top 10, and 12 captured the number one spot. She was known for songs like You're My Man, How Can I Unlove You, Keep Me in Mind, What a Man My Man Is, and of course, her phenomenal worldwide crossover smash hit in 1970, Rose Garden. That song made her an international superstar and a trailblazer. In fact, she was the first female country artist to have a number one record worldwide. She was the first female country performer to appear on The Tonight Show, and she was the first female country performer to headline at Madison Square Garden. Her multi-platinum Rose Garden album was the highest grossing album by a female recording artist for 27 years until Shania Twain broke that record in 1997. Lynn Anderson won a Grammy Award, 2 Academy of Country Music Awards, an American Music Award, 3 Billboard Magazine Awards, a Country Music Association Award, and a People's Choice Award. She was also named Artist of the Decade by Record World, and in 2019, she was inducted into the Western Music Association Hall of Fame and the North American Country Music Association Hall of Fame. In 2002, Country Music Television named her one of the 40 greatest women of country music, and Rolling Stone included her on their list of the 100 greatest country artists of all time. She's such a legend that she's even had a rose named after her by the American Rose Society. Our guest started out as president of Lynn Anderson's official fan club at the age of 18. He then became her accountant, then her booking agent for over 10 years, and finally, he was her manager for the last 12 years of her life until she passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack in 2015 at the age of 67. But most of all, he was Miss Anderson's very dear friend and closest confidant. I'm delighted to welcome Michael Dempsey to our show. Michael, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. What a nice introduction, Harvey, of Lynn and me.
It's an easy thing to do for a legend like Lynn Anderson. Michael, I understand that Rose Garden was the first song you remember hearing as a child, and it was the first record you received when you were 5 years old, correct?
This is true. On my birthday, I would have been 5 in 1971. And about that time, I got my record, got the little portable record player along with the Rose Garden album. You know, we didn't listen to country stations. I heard it on the pop stations being taken back and forth to kindergarten. So anyway, that was like my favorite song. So mom hooked me up come birthday time.
Are you able to tell us, Michael, what was it about Lynn's voice that resonated with you so much?
I think it was that because I was not, still am not a big country fan. I respect the genre, sure, certainly, but there's been no other country entertainer or singer that's drawn me in like she did initially. And I think it was the same thing it was for a lot of people, the pop, not hard country sound that she put out. And, it was like popish versus twangy country. So I think that was the appeal for me.
How did you become president of Lynn Anderson's official fan club?
I met her at what they have a thing in Nashville called Fanfare every year. And I went, of course, I belonged to her fan club as a teenager, and I became close friends with her fan club president. And she was retiring and going back into nursing. Now, this was after I'd met Lynn as a little obsessed fan, as you see in the picture there with the I Love Lynn Anderson t-shirt. That was our first meeting at Fanfare of 85. And Linda, the fan club president, was retiring. And because Linda and I had established a relationship, Lynn, when Linda was leaving, Lynn asked her who did she think would do a good job at handling the fan club henceforth. And Linda suggested me. So that's where it started.
Tell me about the first time you met Lynn. What happened?
She probably thought I was a nut, but at fanfare that they had this place where you could wait and watch the stars as they entered, and I had waited on her for like 2 days to come. She was supposed to be there the day before and she didn't show up. So anyway, I on the second day I was waiting. I didn't care about seeing anybody else there. And anyway, I was waiting, and finally I see this candy apple red, one of those super, super expensive sporty cars come driving through, and it was a convertible. And there was this long flowing blonde hair. And I said, oh my God, I think that's her. So anyway, as she was driving to where the stars go to park, I ran behind her and greeted her as soon as she got out of the car, and she saw my t-shirt. So she knew that I wasn't just your run of the mill fan. And that was the first time I met her. I of course was over the top excited, and she probably, as I said, thought I was some unhinged nut job, but that's where it started.
Can you remember what you said to her and what she said to you?
I said, I've been waiting to meet you since I was a little boy. And she said, bless your heart. She said, and she gave me a hug, and she had a Diet Pepsi bottle in her hand and her purse. And she said, walk me into the building. And I did. And of course, I spoke to her, talked to her for just a few minutes. I didn't want to, I figured I'd probably scared her enough as it was. So I went on about my business and, pretended to be interested in some of the other events going on there, but I couldn't wait to get back over there to her. So, but I gave it some time, and I went back over that evening, or that later that afternoon. And then, of course, she was very gracious. And I mean, she couldn't have been any nicer to me than she was. And it certainly, I mean, I think she was always very, very devoted to her fans and very good to her fans. And that's anybody who is a fan will tell you that. But anyway, yeah, that was our first, that was my first meeting, as I said, when I was 18 years old, and I'll never forget it. Ferrari, that's what she came up in, a candy apple red Ferrari. She had just bought it from Lee Majors. That was something I'll never forget, her driving, coming in with the convertible and the long flowing blonde hair. Always thought this lady has the most beautiful hair. That's where it started.
Now, you went to college and graduate school. How did you come to be Lynn's full-time employee?
Just from getting to know her, being around her and becoming friends, and she knew that she could trust me, and we became really fast friends and really close. And I was doing the fan club thing went on probably until my mid-20s, and then I outgrew that and then took on other duties, such as she was in between booking agents, and I said, I think I can do a better job than they're doing. She said, prove it to me. I did. So I started booking her and became her agent. And she never looked back. She said, you've done more for me than any agent in the last 20 years that I've had. So I was her booking agent. Well, then her bookkeeper retired, took over there. And then I put that aside and then went into the management with her. So it all just kind of rolled in, it was progressive over the years, but it was, I don't think anybody else had well, I don't say anybody else, but I wouldn't have had the heart to do it for anybody else or the drive to do it for anybody else but her. And she knew that. So she liked the results. And, that's kind of where we, started and ended. And again, the personal side was always mixed in with the business side. But as I've said, the personal side was always what was priority, and the friendship.
Well, you know what's fascinating about that? I've never really thought about what kind of training or education someone has to have in order to be an agent or a manager. And you just started out with your love of her and her music, and somehow you taught yourself what was involved. How did you do that?
Well, Harvey, I will say her manager at the time was Bonnie Garner with CBS Record, or she was the next vice president of CBS Records. And Bonnie was very, very instrumental in helping me learn the ropes. I mean, she had her line open for me anytime I had a question for anything. She was there to help me and walk me through it. I mean, it was Greek to me when I started, but I'm a quick learner. And once I learned it, Bonnie said, "Hey, you're doing better than I was doing." And I think Bonnie was getting older and she'd kind of lost interest she had interest in other things besides entertainment. So she was a big, big help to me. So no, I couldn't have done it without her help initially. But after a point, I didn't need it. I didn't need her help, but I certainly relied upon and often reached out for her sage advice just for things that I wanted to know, not necessarily pertaining to the booking or whatever, but just in general. So anyway, she was a huge help to me.
Have you ever considered being an agent or a manager for any other
No,
artist since Lynn passed away?
no, I would, in fact, I've only been back to Nashville a couple of times since then, and they've all been for events related to Lynn. And I don't have hardly the drive or the interest nor the interest to do it for any other artist. I mean, it would be like if you ask them, do you want to book so and so? Not really. Okay, bye. That would be me. Well, if they said that to me when it was Lynn, I'm like, oh man, you don't know what you're missing. I mean, I was her best advocate. I could sell her because I knew what she was capable of. But others, no. To answer your question, no, I wouldn't consider it for anyone else.
Boy, was she lucky to have you. Now, Lynn was the first female country singer to appear every week on national television as a regular on the Lawrence Welk show in the late 60s. Did she ever tell you how she felt about being on that show?
Yes, she did. In fact, we discussed it many times. She was very close with Mr. Welk, and she said that he taught her a lot. How that started quickly was his son had one of her albums and told his dad, Larry Welk, his son, told his dad to get her on the show as a guest. So he did, Lawrence did, and it became a regular 2-year stint. Well, she was the only country performer on network television for 2 years. I mean, that's it. That's the only country music you saw on national television. I mean, you had your syndicated programs like the Porter Wagoner Show and those things, but they were in regional areas versus national. So, but yeah, she was very proud of that, and it was a great springboard for her.
We had Ralna English on our show a few years ago, and she absolutely adored Lawrence Welk. But I read that Lynn was not happy with the choice of songs they gave her to sing on that show. Is that right?
That was true. At first, they were sticking her behind, like hay bales behind her,
Mm.
and the little gingham dresses. And she said, "Hey, that's so stereotypically country music, and I don't want to do that. I want a more glamorous image." And if you'll notice, as the show progressed, she did start out in the gingham dresses with the hay bales behind her, but in short order, she was in the dresses with high heels and an orchestra behind her. So yeah, she apparently voicing that to Mr. Welk made a difference.
Is it true that Lynn Anderson's husband, Glenn Sutton, who was a songwriter and producer, was initially not in favor of her recording the song Rose Garden?
Yeah, she had the Joe South Introspect album, which he recorded it on there, and it had been recorded 7 times by men. Did nothing. She was obsessed with that song and wanted to record it. He kept telling her it was a man's song because of the line, "I could promise you things like big diamond rings." That's not something a man or woman would say to a man. And they had like 15 minutes left over of reserved studio time on a 2-day run. So he said, let's give that song you're obsessed with a shot. And they did it. Well, Clive Davis was in the building at the time and walked down the hall and you heard the playback of it. And he said, that's her next single.
Wow.
So,
And the rest is history.
yeah. And, Glenn Sutton, incredible songwriter, won Grammys for his songwriting for Tammy Wynette. Of course, he produced Rose Garden. Anyway, yeah, it was and she said she figured that at the end of it, they had a #1 record with it, country, but no idea that it would do what it did in terms of internationally, #1 in 16 countries. And I mean, it just opened up an entirely new avenue for country music.
Although Lynn Anderson was best known for being a country artist, she sang songs from many genres. She recorded lots of pop songs like Knock Three Times, Proud Mary, Top of the World, Under the Boardwalk, and many others. Does it bother you, Michael, that she's always been pigeonholed as a country music singer?
It doesn't because she's people that know the history of country music and are really into it. They she falls under the classification of country politan, which is country with strings behind it, a lot of strings. And that's predominantly what she did, particularly in the early 70s on, forward. And so anyway, no, not really, because I'm proud or yeah, proud for her doing what she did for the genre of country music. So, and I know that she was certainly.
Well, that's an interesting term, countrypolitan, which is a blend of country and pop, correct?
Well, it's like sophisticated country is what it kind of means, but yeah, more or less country pop.
Did you see Lynn's performance on Starsky and Hutch?
I have the DVD. I saw it when it aired in 1977, as a kid, and then of course I have the DVD. And yes, she was incredible.
I love that she sang the song Wrap Your Love All Around Your Man, which became a hit after the show was broadcast. It was just wonderful, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, she wanted to do her own stunts in that show, and they wouldn't allow her because of they had a double, but for other reasons they didn't allow her to do that. But she would do anything. She would try anything once. She was not a scaredy cat.
Did Lynn have a lot of friends in the music business, like maybe other big music stars like Dolly Parton and Tammy Wynette?
They were. She was fairly close to Tammy Wynette because that was probably her biggest competitor at the time. I think her friends were probably behind the scenes people, writers and producers more so than actual artists. Of course, she had, they were acquaintances, but friends, I don't know, not really, not that I would say, not close friendships. Tammy Wynette, particularly, would probably have been the closest friend because of Lynn's husband, Glenn, having written so much of Tammy's material.
I don't think Lynn was known for living a kind of a Hollywood lifestyle, was she?
Not really, not a Hollywood lifestyle, but when Hollywood needed a country singer for shows that you didn't normally see country singers on, she's the one they would call because of her back to the, she wasn't country, twangy country, which at that point wasn't, it didn't have mass appeal and mainstream appeal. And for a lot of them, most of them, in fact, but she was a sure bet. So she usually got the call.
Do you have a favorite Lynn Anderson song?
I do. My favorite, Harvey, is the song Keep Me in Mind, which Glenn Sutton, her husband, again wrote for her, which was a number one hit in 1973, because I think it shows off her vocal range more so than a lot of the poppy, country poppy songs that she did otherwise.
Do you have a favorite album?
Probably the Rose Garden album, believe it or not, because there's not a bad song on that album. Usually most albums I can say there's two or three songs on I'm not crazy about, but the Rose Garden album, there's not a bad song on it.
Well, my favorite album of Lynn's is Songs That Made Country Girls Famous because it's a tribute to the female country singers who came before her. Do you like that one?
I like it. Okay. I'm not crazy about it because there again, because it has a lot of the songs from ladies that I wasn't really familiar with when I got the album at the time. I ended up buying it in a secondhand bin because it was out before my time, but or not my time, but before I was old enough to appreciate it. So anyway, yeah, it's not a big favorite of mine. Sorry, Harvey.
That's okay. Did Lynn have a favorite song and a favorite album?
I don't know. She never told me about that. If she did, we never discussed that. We didn't talk a lot about what was funny, Harvey, and I'll make this quick, but she would often call me and say, when did I do this? Or when did I record this? What year was this number one? What year was this? What year did I appear on such and such show? It's like she didn't keep up with that stuff. It just wasn't, it didn't like consume her, as it would with some artists, you would think. But no, I don't have a favorite. If she did, she never told me.
Now, Michael, I'm sure you know that Lynn Anderson has always been extremely popular with the gay community. In fact, in the 90s, I attended an AIDS fundraiser in Toronto called Fashion Cares, and Lynn was the headliner. Why do you think gay men love Lynn Anderson so much?
I don't know, Harvey, but just about everybody, every male, unless they're drug or being dragged to a concert by their wives who were fans or whatever, but just about every male that I met was, you know, likely probably from the gay community. I don't know why she was so popular with them. I think because they felt that she didn't judge. She you know she was in all the years that I knew her and as close as I was to her, I didn't know her politics because she would never talk about it for fear of offending anybody because she just loved people and she loved fans, and it didn't matter their sexual orientation. But yes, you're right, they were absolutely a big part of her fan base.
Was she aware of it?
Oh yeah, I mean, no doubt about it. In fact, it's like she had like a whole congregation that would come, I mean, travel to certain concerts and things and meet up and whatever. And it was like, yeah, probably a group of, I don't know, 10, 12, 15 of them. Of course, she knew, but you, she never ever treated them any differently. In fact, if anything, she treated them with probably more admiration than she did your run of the mill fan.
That makes me love her even more.
There you go.
Now, Lynn was extremely well known for her love of horses. In fact, some people say that as a child, she could ride a horse even before she learned to walk. Can you tell us a bit about that side of her life?
It's funny, Harvey, because she, yes, in answer to your question, horses were equally as important to her. Her equestrian career and activities were equally as important as the music side. But she knew that I wasn't a big fan of the Western stuff. She said, I know you like the glamorous Lynn Anderson, not the Western Lynn Anderson. She says, but I'm going to do this or do that or whatever. Or like, give me some Western gigs at some Western venues and whatever. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that. Let's go with the where you can sing your big poppy country hits, not the Western songs. So she knew I wasn't a big fan of that. But yes, she was a very, very established equestrian, and it was a huge part of her life.
Now, Michael, I think it's well known that Lynn struggled with alcohol in the later years of her life. And I believe she went to the Betty Ford Center at one point. What do you think caused her to have a drinking problem?
I think it's very common in the entertainment industry to have an addiction of some sort, be it alcohol or drugs. And that's the one thing I'll have to say about her is she never tried to sweep it under the rug. In fact, she was in the Betty Ford Center twice. She's human. She has an addiction. She's going to deal with it head on. She tried, failed a couple, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stints or whatever. And, but there again, that didn't come about until the latter part of her life. And I think it's just the business in general. I mean, it's so demanding that no matter how you're feeling, what your day's like, if you're contractually bound to go perform and go out there with a smile on your face, and I mean, imagine if we had to do that and make a venue full of people think there's nothing wrong. I mean, that you're perfectly happy and you could feel the worst you've ever felt in your life. And imagine what a strain and stress that could be. And I think, as I said, I think that's why it's probably such a common, thing in the industry. But yeah, she did battle it. And when she died, she was So she was successful. She had been sober for a while, and I was so proud of.
Do you think she was a happy person?
Probably not in the latter part of her life because of the obviously you don't you don't have an addiction if you're not happy. I mean, if you're happy, I should say. Yeah, I mean, or I wouldn't think you would. But I remember, and I'll say this quickly, Harvey. I remember after one of the DUI accident, or after a DUI episode, her PR company had written a statement and sent it over for her approval, saying that it's been a lifelong battle, and I'm doing my best to deal with it. And she wrote back and said, absolutely not approved. I didn't have my first drink until I was 30 years old, period, of any kind. So, that's why I say it came about later on. It was a struggle for her. I hate when people talk about that, and I'm not talking about you, but I mean, I hate, when I see comments online about, you know, inferences to that, and it's distasteful because those are people that don't deal with addiction and have no idea what it's like, and especially somebody that's doing everything within them to fight it and get help, and she did.
Do you think she was happy with the career that she had?
I read a statement the other day in an interview that she did where she said that she was glad to be at a point where her life didn't begin and end with the top 40 as it did in the 70s, in Nashville. She moved out to Taos, New Mexico in the latter part of her life as well. And she said that although she had an awful lot of success in Nashville and, many good times, her heart was always in the West, somewhere out West. I would always tell her, Lynn, you're legend status now, so you don't have to have a hit now. You're beyond that. You've won every award there is to win. You've broke glass ceilings, and you have the admiration of those who came behind you. Reba McEntire was a huge fan of Lynn's and gave her credit for opening up so many avenues for female singers in the business. And so anyway, yeah, I think she was, as far as her career goes, I think because she was still touring, the end of her life. I mean, I was booking dates for her left and right. These weren't like cheesy little places either, Harvey. These were, nice. They were either performing arts centers or fairs or high-end casinos, casino showrooms that, there'd be some big names in there. So, I never ever, when I booked her, if I saw that it was like a place where, lower end acts or country, be they country or whatever, were playing, or like one hit wonders or something, I'm like, no, I don't care what they're paying. I'm not putting her in there just because of the reputation of entertainment.
I'm going to say it again. She was so lucky to have you, Michael. Now, of all the times you spent with Lynn Anderson, is there one specific experience that stands out in your memory as your favorite moment with her?
Probably when she came down to Charleston, South Carolina, which is where I live, and spent the week with me. She was doing a show in North Carolina that I'd booked, and I went and saw the show, picked her up. She spent a week with me and then flew home. And we had a blast. I took her all over town. I took her to the beach. I took her, we had as I said, we had a blast. I'll never forget that as long as I live. I hated for her to leave.
Lynn passed away quite unexpectedly in 2015 at the young age of 67. I know you were absolutely devastated by her death, Michael, and that you were comforted by Lynn's daughter. Tell me what she said to you.
I got a call about 11:30 at night. Lynn had just returned from Italy a few days prior, and she was in the hospital with pneumonia, which, just thought it'd be treated and she'd be out of there. Get a call about 11:30 at night from her daughter. I say, hello. Anytime you get a call that time of night, something's not right. And When I saw it was her daughter, I knew something wasn't right, but I certainly wasn't expecting that. And the first thing she says to me, and she's of course crying, is "Mom's gone." Well, I thought she meant mom's like gone somewhere and they can't find her. And I said, "What do you mean gone?" And she said, "She's gone. She passed." I went berserk. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I mean, it was just so out of left field. So yes, it was a very, in fact, for the two years or so afterwards, I was like in a stupor almost. I had a hard time functioning. The shock value and the huge void. Lynn's daughter told me, well, she had two daughters, and one of them told me that she wanted to thank me for being her mom's glue that kept her together. And the other daughter, Lisa, said that she was just so thankful for all I had done for her mother, and she knew that mom loved you. She says, "I know mom loved you like unlike anybody else, and you were so good to her." And of course, I said, she was to me as well. So it wasn't just a one-way street. I was good to her, but she was very good to me as well. So, it was a two-way street.
But you really were her rock.
I think so. There were no topics that were off limits for us when we would talk, and I could talk to her about anything. And I mean, if somebody had told me when I was 18 years old, one day you'll be talking with Lynn Anderson about things that you probably wouldn't talk to some of your best friends about, I'd have said, "You're crazy." But, that's in fact how it came, how it turned out. We were just very open and honest with each other. And I don't know. That's why I said it's just such a huge void, Harvey, because she was, I don't know, such a huge part of my life for so many years.
What would you say was the most important lesson you learned from Lynn?
The most important lesson I learned from Lynn, I had a tendency when people would tick me off on the phone or, wherever, to react, like kind of, get indignant with them if I felt they had done that to me. And Lynn told me, "Don't do that, Michael." She said, "Don't react, respond." And I thought, that's very smart. And I've never forgotten that. So, and it sunk in, don't react, respond. And that's what I tried to do. I've tried to do ever since she planted that in my head.
That's very good advice. Now, you
Is
were
it?
working full time for Lynn for the last decade of her life. What happened to your career after she passed away?
I started doing accounting again for just independent, on my own with other people locally here, not celebrities or anything like that. And in fact, I've had some people call me wanting me to do even represent certain artists in or agents for a couple of people in Nashville. In fact, it was Lynn's PR company, and asked me, she said, "You were so good with Lynn. Would you be interested in doing this for such and such?" And I'm like, "No, thank you for thinking enough of me to ask that, though." And the same with the books, keeping the books, the financial books and stuff. And I said, "No, not interested." So that's what I do.
I understand there's a beautiful rose garden in Lynn Anderson's honor at Woodlawn Memorial Park Cemetery in Nashville, correct?
That's correct.
Do you go there often?
I've been there twice since it opened. Of course, the ribbon cutting ceremony, I was there, and then I've been one time after that. It's a beautiful garden with over 100. I think there's like 125 Lynn Anderson roses. It's the actual Lynn Anderson rose, and it's beautiful. So yeah, but I've only been twice.
Now, I don't believe Lynn ever wrote a memoir, but you've been doing a lot since she passed away to honor her legacy and keep her memory alive. Michael, do you have any plans to write a book about your relationship with her?
No, there's a lot of things that Lynn and I talked about, and things that she knew about me and I knew about her, that I would never betray her confidence, and I knew and so no, those things will stay private. But I have an interesting story to tell people if I meet them, and the question is, how did you meet her? How did you get started? And that's, oh, you got to go into the whole process. But anyway, so in answer to your question, no, I've never thought about that.
I want to tell our viewers that you can learn more about Lynn Anderson by going to her official website, lynnandersonrosegarden.com. There's also an official Lynn Anderson presence on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and Twitter. Well, Michael, in our remaining moments, I want to ask you, is there anything about Lynn Anderson that you feel the public doesn't know and should know?
I would think it is probably how monumental she was in taking country music from, as we said, standing in front of hay bales for the women, particularly, because it was a male dominated business back in her, in the early 70s. And I mean, this lady, she took it to places that Johnny Carson, for example, as you said, she was the first country singer on the Tonight Show. He hated country music. She told me this. Johnny Carson hated country music, but he loved Rose Garden. And that was her ticket to get on the Tonight Show. And she was on there about 3 or 4 times probably after that. And so I'd say just the avenues that she opened, the ceilings that she broke for, artists to come behind her, and taking country music to a broader audience than it otherwise may have, reached.
Well, there's certainly no question about that. She was the first major crossover artist, and she absolutely made a mark for the public who would never otherwise have even listened to country music. Well,
Exactly.
Michael, it's been an absolute pleasure having this opportunity to celebrate Lynn Anderson's amazing life and career on our show. Thank you for everything you've done to honor her memory and to keep her legacy alive. And thank you so much for taking the time to appear on our show.
It was my pleasure, Harvey, and I appreciate you knew your stuff when you're asking questions, and that means a lot because you did your research, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the opportunity. So I thank you.
Well, that's very sweet of you. It was easy to do research in this case because I'm a fan myself, and I can't help but thinking how fortunate she was to have a friend like you, and how everyone deserves to have a Michael Dempsey in their life. I really mean that. I consider you my friend, and I feel so grateful to have you in my life.
Well, you absolutely are my friend. You're correct about that, and likewise.
Our guest has been Michael Dempsey, who was the manager and best friend of country music legend Lynn Anderson. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you to our producer, Steve Silver, my director of programming, Deborah Batsafin, my PR director, Laurie Towers, and my entire team at the XPTV1 network in the UK. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.